Hello everyone, thank you for coming today. Thank you Bernard for coming today and agreeing to be our speaker at Startup Grind Zagreb.
Welcome.
So, I'm very proud of our intimate atmosphere we have here today.
Best for the best, huh?
Yes, exactly. So no distractions. So let's start off easy. You are the CEO and co-founder of ABC Accelerator, so let's start from the very beginning. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, there's not so much to tell. I work for, first I worked for the university for about 2 years. Then I worked for IBM, 17 years. Now I work for ABC about 4 years. So that's the simplest explanation of my career. Now, I'm very interested in tech. So tech always fascinated me, any tech. So my parents didn't like that, but I took things apart, okay? All the things. So I always wanted to know what's inside. Then once I found out what's inside, I was not interested anymore. So I left the things apart. So, but mostly what I've done is, I've done business, and mostly I was, the one that was kind of used to translate technology to business and business to technology. So that was my major role in IBM. And then for startups, my main thing is always trying to understand what is their next step. So what's the barrier that they need to remove for them to grow. So that's what I do now, mostly. And then once I know and we have established what's the next stop, then we set through we kind of make a roadmap. What do we want to do? And for most startups, I found out that the good ones can do a change once per week. Okay, so if you're a fair startup, then you can do still one every 2 weeks. Now, if you're one of the weakers, then you do one change per month. This is, of course, not true for the hardware-related startups, because the situation there is dictated by the technology that is slow, while the IT startups are able to change that fast. So that's mainly what I do.
So, for those of you, and there is at least one person who doesn't know what ABC Accelerator is, can you tell us a little bit about it? So, what it is and how it got started?
So, an accelerator is a place where you have a bunch of knowledge that helps you identify and remove obstacles for your growth. Okay? So this is what an accelerator is. So it's mostly, it tries to identify what the problems are, and then decides these problems, can they be solved by knowledge or by money? And most of the problems in the pre-scale-up phase, or in the middle, in the early scale-up phase, are solved by knowledge, which means access to the market. Okay? So when you're entering the first customers, you need a lot of knowledge from that certain segment, from that certain channel, to kind of get to know the customer, which means you need somebody who is an expert, and you throw that expert on the problem, on the barrier, and the barrier goes away. Now, once you have established a pattern of how the sales is going, then you can do the first test and build your own sales capability, which means you get a seller. Once you have one, then you can have him or her educate the next one. And that's already a pattern. From this point on, if this all works, it's only a question of money. Because you can explain to any investor is if I employ one more, I get 1 million more revenue. And this is something that an investor will understand very clearly once there's a pattern. Then knowledge is no longer a question, it's just a question of money. What the accelerator does, it mostly helps you with getting knowledge, and if through the process of the acceleration you get to the point where you are, I call it investment ready, then money is something that usually comes through the network that also ABC has. Because we know a few investors that are able to invest also monies that, 500,000, 1 million and even more.
So does ABC Accelerator have its own fund that you invest in startups, or how does it work?
Well, we had a fund. What we mostly invest is we invest a very small bridge round of 25K, because we found out that we have not specialized in investing money. You need to specialize. It's not, anything you do needs to have skills behind, okay? Needs to have knowledge. So without knowledge, then you just throw money. You basically give money away. So, and what we found out is we're not good at investing money, but we are good at investing knowledge. And from that reason, we partner with small funds, like, I don't know, the Filerush that's now quite popular in Croatia, and some of the other ones. We partner with them because they specialize in investing money. They know how to do it, they know what KPIs to look for. So this is something that's natural. At the beginning, when ABC was formed, we said, okay, we will have our own fund. And it would have been possible, but we would need to split the team, give one part of the team to the money side and the other side to the knowledge part, because they are not the same. And this is something that, while you mature as an accelerator, you find out that a lot of other accelerators have developed into or venture funds like, Lunch Hub. This is one of the interesting examples that is from the region, because they started as an accelerator and then transformed into an early venture fund, which is not so much early anymore for our region, because now they are looking for investment of $500,000 and up.
More for scaleups then.
Yeah, but they said, our knowledge is how to invest money. We just want to keep a small component of knowledge, but we would walk away from knowledge because this is not something that we can specialize. And we said, okay, let's find someone on the market who can specialize in knowledge. They should do it. And this is the way of the things.
Okay, so why would the startup want to go into an accelerator anyway? So what's the...
A startup as such has only one currency, and that currency is time. That's the only currency a startup has, okay? There's no other currency. Money does not exist for a startup. It might not look that way, but the only currency they have is time. It's how much time they can invest into the project to make it successful. So what an accelerator does, it kind of compresses time for the founder. How it looks like from the point of a startup, because the time gets compressed. You focus on the things that are important, and you start moving away things that are not important. And in the accelerator, you have quite, I would say, a strong network of people that come to the accelerator. So you don't waste getting to know people, but you just start using them. And that's something that has proven to be a model for most of the accelerators, that they concentrate knowledge around the startup, making it faster.
Would you also say that an accelerator, especially if a startup completes an acceleration program, is also a verification to investors, to any possible investor?
Some programs yes, some programs no. This is today. It's this word description of an accelerator has been widely misused because it's a buzzword. So everybody now is an accelerator. You just put a name inside, so you're an accelerator. So and this is something that everybody can do. A lot of investors or VCs will not require, but they will notice if you have been part of an accelerator, especially a good one, because a good accelerator will at the end leave you with something that would kind of make you investment ready. So you would be able to talk to an investor and you would be able to explain not what your vision is, but how you will make money. Because especially in the region here, investors are interested in how you will make money. Which, US in the past was more hyped. But even now, and the money there is different than it's here. So even they look at how you will make money.
Okay. You now opened a call for your 9th cohort, yes?
That one is probably is finished because it is starting in next month. But we have one open for September. That's for the 10th.
For the 10th call?
Yeah.
Okay, so when was the first one?
The first one started on the 31st of March in 2015.
Okay, so after you completed the first one, or maybe even the first two, what is something that surprised you the most, if anything? What is something you didn't expect when entering in the first program?
Well,
Did everything go exactly as planned, or?
Well, this is, you don't know what to expect, okay? One of the founders, Dan, was part of Startup Bootcamp, so he knew how it looked like there. So one of the early members was also Julien, who was in YC, and Aleš Pustovar, who knew a lot about this segment. It's, what at the end you're surprised how perhaps, I wouldn't know how to say that, but you're a bit shocked how much effort it really takes and how long the journey is. Because at the beginning you think, okay, let's take a startup, in the first program of 2015, and you say, okay, in 2 years they'll do something. 2 years is very short. So the time component kind of surprises you, because you say, okay, you neglect that fact that the Facebooks, the Googles, it took years until they were under the radar before they jumped on the radar, and you just neglect that. You think, well, we'll put huge amount of effort and things will go faster. Things always have their own pace. So this is something that perhaps for me was the biggest surprise. Is it's not a marathon. It's much longer.
So yeah, Brad Feld always says it's not a zero-sum game. Sometimes it takes a lot more, and there's a lot of things you can't see at the beginning. So speaking of, when you are choosing the first cohort of startup, is it still the same process, or are you careful about some things when choosing the last cohort?
I would say we're more picky now, okay? We're more picky than we were before, but we still look for the same things. So first, we look at the team, we look at the people that come, okay? So if the people don't listen, then we can't do our job, okay? Which, you know, a lot of founders come to us and say, well, we can do everything, we know, we just need the money, and then we're successful. And there's a lot of them, okay? And those are, in most cases, people that we will not work with. Because simply we do not solve we don't remove any of the barriers that they have. And they might be successful, but they cannot be successful with us, so we kind of walk away. So this is a thing that for us is very important, is, you know, that the team kind of is teachable and will drive the startup for a long period of time. And this is something that, you know, like I was saying before, is if you get people that are overly hyped, that hype usually lasts for about 3 years. You know, and then, you know, it goes like, and, you know, the hype is not enough, you know. You need to, at the end, have somebody in the team that does the execution.
So those are founders that are in love with the idea, basically, right?
Not so much, you know, it's not, those are inventors, okay?
Yeah.
Those that are in love with their product, those are inventors. Inventors are specific. So, and super difficult to work with. Because, you know, they are so convinced in the product that they will not change it. And the issue is not that you make the best product, but we were discussing before, we kind of live in a capitalism. So, you know, the success that is measured is money. So, and the money comes from a customer. So, it would be kind of logical that customer is always right. And if you have people that say, I am always right, that is not customer-centric. It's super difficult to work with people like that if you don't have. So I would kind of say that this is something that is important, that people kind of do the shit. You know, you always have to dream big. If you don't dream big, then you know, stop probably after a year. If you don't have the hype, the good hype, then you stop in a year because, you know, it's too much. But with the hype, you need to get the job done. If you don't get the job done, then, and this is what we look mostly in the startup, can they get the job done?
So looking at the team and trying to see if they can really execute what they want.
Yes.
So speaking of team, do you usually accept only teams that are at least 2 people, like some accelerators do? Do you ever accept solo founders? And okay, let's start with that one.
We accepted some solo founders. Some cases turn out good. Most of them don't turn out good. First is the question of volume, okay? One person can do this much, okay? So the question is always, why do we have one founder? And sometimes this works, most of the time it doesn't, because it's too much. Most of the times. Now this is not a general rule, so we would always make exceptions. But we kind of welcome if there are at least 2 or 3 founders, because it's easier to go through the process.
So what would be the number that looks easiest so far in the last 8 cohorts?
Well, we had teams from 1 to like 9. And what we practice today is we mostly ask the startup to have 1, in ideal cases 2 people that are focused at sales. Those we want to have. We found out that we had the developers to be part of the team also, but their production time went down, which is not what we advocate. You know, we advocate that we make you faster, not that we make you slower. So we said, leave the developers at home where they're productive, and bring the people that can implement the change. Because what if you define a KPI of a barrier and you say this needs to change, then I don't want to see you until that barrier goes away. Because otherwise you do everything. If you do everything, you do nothing. Because everything and nothing is the same.
Okay, so it's a lot easier for you, of course, to give the experience and the knowledge to business developers.
Yeah. You can call them business developers, you can call them whatever, but somebody needs to kind of implement what was decided.
The rest of the stuff that's not developing itself. So did you ever have a team that was solely developers?
We had.
And what was that like then?
Well, it was challenging. Again, if you go back to the barriers, okay? So, the question of each barrier is defining how much time it will take for the barrier to go away, okay? So if you have a tech person and you want to teach the tech person how to run a business, it's possible. If that person has some given talent, it might take from 3 to 9 months that they master the significant basics to run the startup. So, and if we accept a startup in the ABC program that is defined for a very active 3 months, then they will be ready after the program is finished. So, it's always a question what barriers need to be removed inside of the given program. So, if the team would come into the accelerator to learn how to manage the company, we would say no. We can work with you in a different way, or remotely, or whatever. We always do experiments. But the point is, there are certain things that can be done in a certain amount of time, and certain things that can't be done.
And need more time, yeah.
And this is not that it's a problem to have only developers. It's not a problem. It's just a question of what do you want, what's your priority. And kind of my argumentation was, we had two, 3 teams that were only developers. And then you just focus on delivering the product, and don't focus even on sales too much, only if it happens organic. But you kind of define what needs to happen, and then the team, if the team wants to survive, they learn and they adapt. And they hire somebody, or they get a new founder. It's just a question of what you want to achieve. So it's not a question of are you a developer or are you a seller or whatever, but that you are realistic in what can be achieved. This is much bigger of a problem than having all developers or having all business people. That's if you're realistic in what you want to achieve. If you are realistic, then we can help you.
So, how many approximately startups are there in a cohort? Did that number change over the years?
It significantly changed. Okay, so we started the first program with 8. The second was with 10. Then the third one with 20, and the fourth I think was 27. And then we went to 6. And then we went to 8. And then we now the cohorts are between 6 and 12, depending on what kind of startups we get, because we're not driven by numbers. We're just driven by the can we accelerate the team.
So you mentioned that the most important thing, one of the most important things for you as Accelerator is to remove obstacles and barriers for the startups. So how much does choosing the startups that have a similar barrier impact on choosing the startups for a new cohort? Or does it impact at all?
No, it doesn't.
Cool.
No, the only thing that what beside the team where we are very careful is that the startup is near product market fit or has achieved that product market fit, because this is the time period where we can help the most. That where our value accelerates. But the barriers, they change weekly. If you're a good startup, they change weekly. So, and harmonizing them to get, like an orchestra, let's everybody have a business model problem this week. Next week we have the digital marketing problem. Yeah, it kind of works in probably, the stories for children and stuff, but
or a pre-accelerated program where everyone starts at the same level, basically.
This is one of the sure kind of lesson learned. We are so different and we are so alike. So when you get 27 startups, which you would say, well, sure you have a pattern. You had 27 startups in a different stage.
Yeah, speaking of, why the drop from 27 to 6?
Mostly because we, it's super difficult to handle 27.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the reasons. The second is you. You would need to kick out some. Okay? Yeah. That would be the right thing. Okay? Out of 27 that you accept, you would need to come to about 5 to 12. And with them, you can do one-on-one. Because with 27, doing one-on-one is super difficult. Okay? We did it for a year, for half a year, and this is, then you have a light burnout and stuff like that, but it's doable. At the end, that number is not important. What is important is how many startups get invested, how many startups get higher rounds. That's what's important. It's not the number. Sometimes, statistic works for you, okay? So going to 3 would not work for us. But, something in the range of 10, that works. Here statistic already starts working. 27 is better. We might, if we might get 27 excellent applications today, we might even do it. We probably do it like 3 programs, like at the same time. But, we're still crazy, so we do all kind of shit. Sorry, but this.
Well, it's good that you still experiment, of course.
Because the number is a number, we just don't force it. At that point in time, we forced it because we wanted to prove that the engine works and that it can really produce a high amount of startups. Statistics doesn't.
So, of the startups that enter the program, do all of them finish?
Not all. We didn't have too many. I think we had probably over 120 going for our programs, something in that range. And most of them, like 3 or 4, didn't finish. The rest all finished. We had an issue. 2 were just said, we can't manage this. This is too much for us. Or we die here or we live, and we choose to live. So they were, coming into the program, they underestimated the effort that needs to happen. But otherwise, no, like big majority finishes.
So, while they're in the program, I assume the co-founders are there in location at ABC Accelerator. Do some of them stay after the program?
We
kind of have a extended incubation sometimes if they need it.
We had that, then we stopped having it, then we had it, now we will have it again. We try to kind of remain in contact with our startups. So in all kinds of ways. So if there is a good demand, smart demand from the startups, we will sometimes help them, but we will kind of one-on-one decide what makes sense. Because it's always, it's our time is actually our money.
Sure.
So every hour that I invest in one of the startups, it's the hour that I cannot charge to somebody else. So we try to help those that make sense. This we try.
Makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about equity. So the way Accelerator works is they give you money, they give you knowledge and mentorship in exchange of equity. Is it the same amount of equity now as it was at the beginning?
This has changed partly because now the emphasis is more on knowledge. So we have a 2-phase approach. So one is the program. This will take a certain amount of equity from you. And then the second one is if we invest also money. That's the second part where we take part of the equity. At the beginning, we said we invest 15K and we take 8% of your company. This has now changed. We mostly take 4 plus 4, or it kind of depends. We're not very fixed. We just talk with the startup to see how this affects the valuation, how this affects the future, because our main interest is that we sell that our share as, when it makes sense.
Of course. So you already had some startups that entered your accelerator and already had a valuation, or maybe went through another program or something like that?
Mm-hmm. We had several.
Okay. So of the startup that go through the entire program, you said you keep in touch with them. How much of them survive with the same thing they were in with the accelerator? Do some of them pivot, some of them exit? Have you had any exits from the startups?
We had one, a smaller one. We're expecting to have 1 or 2 this year. That will be a bit bigger. This I cannot disclose numbers, but for our region, for sure, they will be bigger. because the first batch is now, and the second they are getting investments that are over 10 mil evaluation, so it's kind of getting in the right direction. Yeah, this kind of, yeah.
Okay. So every time at one point I open the questions to the audience if they have any questions for a speaker, so I would like to do that now. Just a couple of questions, that's okay, yeah? Question from the audience, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, let's call it like a tech policy expert. Oh, first I want to say I was in ABC Accelerator a few months ago. It's really nice there. I was with the project. We had a event there. And since we were then still in the midst of the copyright reform, and I was going around like, I wouldn't say panicking, but yes, you do need to panic about the whole startup ecosystem, and say, hello guys, I'm following regulatory environment, what's going on. So I was talking with people who are like working in ABC Accelerator, and I was stunned by the amount of, how to say, they haven't been interested at all. So there was like, oh, we don't want to be political. Yeah, you don't need to be political. You don't have to be a communist, or you don't have to be a socialist, or you don't have to be conservative. However, what about hostile regulatory environment for the startups? And we have copyright reform, we have anti-terrorist directives. So I'm just wondering, you as an entrepreneur who have invested so much into that, and now in Slovenia has quite okay, you know, kind of political understanding of what's going on. Do you feel like you need to engage? Do you feel that you have advocacy capability? Do you feel that even if you do engage, that your advocacy will be met somewhere where you can say, excuse us guys, but there are so many startups, ecosystem around Europe panicking and saying that this is a matter of staying alive or dying. And can I bring my concern to the table and can we discuss, because you know this is a big impact on entrepreneurship and on startups. So how do you feel about that? And yes, I did have another question, but I forget, but this is a very complex one. Did you want me to slow down?
Can you repeat the question shortly?
I understand the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So just so I can repeat it.
Yeah, like how, the question for Bernard is, how is he in his position as an entrepreneur who has invested a big deal into whole startup ecosystem? How is he feeling about, or does he follow tech policy environment, or does he feel that he needs to engage? And in case he engages, what does he feel that can be done about it?
So basically,
I would like to second that. I lost like maybe 2 hours today on hostile regulatory environment. 2 hours and a lot of nerves. So I would like to second that question as well.
that's the main question then. Okay. Good.
Well, I was today at Porezna, okay, and to pick up the ABC's text, what this is your text number. So it took me 5 minutes. The lady was super nice. I didn't pay anything, so I was, you know, we have a similar like points in Slovenia. So, okay, you're faster. I was in Italy also picking up the tax number, so it took me probably 45 minutes to complete the transaction. Still, everything very cool. Then I was at the notaries, entering in one of the companies here. It took me 3.5 minutes, which is significantly faster than it is in Slovenia. So in Slovenia, it takes you, a transaction like this would take you like 2 hours. I was in several other countries, and Slovenia and you know, it's fairly easy. I know Estonia is faster, and it's digital. But to respond to your question, I worked 17 years in IBM, okay? So I know all about regulation. So, this I know. I'm not very pro regulation.
Okay.
But I know, and this is perhaps not, the best expression, but I always have some stupid remarks that, are not for camera, but, pissing against the wind is not the best thing. So the question is, and this is now specific if you talk about the entrepreneur or you talk about the startup.
I'm talking about the current policy environment. I'm talking about legislation to be.
Yes.
What you just told me about copyright and anti-terrorist directive is that you actually do not follow the regulation. And I don't see, nobody sees any way how startups can bypass this new regulation. I'm not talking about quotas, and I'm not talking about every day, and I'm not talking about being pro or against regulation. I'm talking about concrete things that are making super concrete concern for the startups, which will not have a possibility anymore to compete with a big corporate. They can invest millions in their filtering. So do you follow what's going on on the EU level or not?
Yeah.
Because you don't,
No, I follow that part, and
Okay.
I understand. I don't follow it that closely because changing that from my side is difficult. We've spoken to some of the government bodies about that, and changing it from the position of Slovenia in EU is difficult. So, and this is a question of then when this problem will present itself in the full scope to the general public, then the general public will change it. And this is, it's they always try to bring in new regulation, and sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. What I have seen in especially the startup ecosystem is that if something is very wrong, these people are the first to scream very loudly, and they all unite. Okay? So when this is going to become a major barrier, then all will push. If all push, then it works. Now it has not become such a big problem at the moment, because it's like with GDPR. It was like the major barrier, and at the end now it's not such a big barrier. It is a barrier. It's slowing down business, and it's done intentionally, but this is how it's done. And I know from IBM has, if you have a certain amount of people inside of the country, then IBM will appoint somebody who is a governmental representative. And that person will talk to the government all the time to influence the regulation, because that is, it's so much value behind. The issue with startups is the concentration is questionable. Now, how will this develop? This is something that we can't focus on that.
Well, I guess we'll see then.
No, just to conclude now, this is a directive, so it is GDPR is regulation, so it's an EU law. I guess you know that. So for the directive, advocacy efforts now need to be focused on individual member states in order to smooth the impact of the badness of that regulation. So this is where I hate to be kind of, digital right activist. What does it mean? Am I a loud hipster and activist shouting around? We need you guys, we need you from business. So, separation between those guys who are always shouting about, freedom for human rights or to do business, and the others who are too busy to do business, to watch the regulatory environment. I don't like this division, so I just want to tell you, to conclude, watch what's going on Slovenia level. You have wonderful people there who are for intellectual property rights. I can give you contact, and I would really love that this stays somewhere in the back so that you know that now is the time maybe to save Slovenia from copyright reform.
Thank you. You know, whatever can benefit the ecosystem,
Yes.
we surely are happy to help because we're part of it.
Okay. So, what would you say is the next step for ABC Accelerator? Do you have any new goals or long-term strategies?
Well, what we want subsequently create an engine that always works. You know that if you go to ABC, you will be able to identify those barriers, and you will be able to kind of jointly remove them. And this is what our focus is. You know, get the model working all the time. Hopefully, one of our alumni, with our help, will become a unicorn, and then that would be the right time to really expand the knowledge, also very much outside. And this is something that's the mission of ABC, to become an engine that works. Because it's, you know, at the beginning we said, okay, let's do this for free 2 years, sell it to someone, and let the future manifest itself. But this is something that has proven to be valuable as an engine, that it consequently produces good companies. And this is something that I think is a very good future, because in the region there is no accelerator. And the region is, you know, even Italy, you know, if you look from Ljubljana about 300 to Italy, you have no accelerator there. You know, the first real accelerators are in Milan. That there are real accelerators. And, you know, you have them in Vienna, but that's 400 kilometers. So the circle and the pool of companies that can be successful is not so small.
So, what would be advice or some advice for startup founders that are thinking of applying to ABC or acceleration?
Advice.
Yeah, before you apply, you might want to think about X.
No, just apply.
Just apply.
No. I will tell you why. Because if you apply, then you start to talk to us, and you get feedback. And we are careful to provide you with structured feedback, okay? Which means with feedback that you can do something with. So, and if you prepare too much, you don't know if this makes sense, because you want to impress us. Don't impress us. You don't come to ABC because of us. You come to ABC because you want to do a company that makes a lot of money. So, you know, that pre-preparation, I don't know if it's useful. It might be useful for you. If it's useful for you, then do it. If it's targeted at us, then don't do it. Because through the process that you will work with us, you will find out, are we a match or not? Because the point is, are we a match? That's the main point. If we're not a match, then, you know, we each go separate ways. So that would be my advice to somebody coming. Just apply, then we start talking, we find out where we are, and then we decide.
And lastly, what would be your...
There's a question.
Just,
Nothing asking.
yeah. let's do it on the networking soon. Okay. So this is my final question. So
Too late.
the final question is, what would be a piece of advice you would give to an early stage startup founder?
What's an early stage?
At the beginning, still idea stage, still thinking things through.
How you can sell it?
What?
How you can sell it?
So that's the question. How can you sell it?
If you, whatever you're doing, if you can't sell it,
Yeah.
don't do it.
Okay.
Because that's, you know, it sounds harsh, okay?
Yeah.
But when you have a startup, you kind of need to set some KPIs, okay? For yourself.
Sure.
So the question is, when will I be successful? When will I be able to say, Bernard, you did a good job? Okay? This is important question. And who will validate that for me? And most of the startups don't do that by money. At least the good founders don't. Because money is so relative, you know? For most of us here, 1 million is a lot. Now, when you earned your first million, 1 million is not a lot. And you kind of think that 100 million is a lot. So, you know, your perspective all the time changes. So, when you start a company, just at the beginning, is if you can find a way how to sell it, then you know a lot about your product. Much more than you think. Because you know, basically, you kind of can imagine the customer. And if you can imagine a customer, then you can probably go and ask that customer, which is the Bible, you know, go ask the customer. And if the customer tells you, you know, I'm not willing to pay for this, or if the customer tells you, you know, you need to show me this and this and this exactly, so I would buy it, then you know what you're developing. Because the main problem with when you have an idea is how much money and time do I need to invest to validate my idea. So the easiest way is if you start looking how you can sell it, because then you reverse engineer your success. It sounds very materialistic, but that's kind of what startups do. They make money. And we love them because they make money, and we all help them because they make money. So, you know, try to sell it. That kind of exposes all of the issues that you would have later on. And it saves a lot of time for you. And you learn the most. Because even if you fail, it's you know, in our region, it's kind of an issue, failing. Failing is not good. Yeah. You're not kind of glorified if you fail, okay? You don't see anyone on TV saying, you know, look, that guy failed, what a great job. You know, nobody says that, you know. They say, you know, that guy made 1 billion, that's a success. And nobody says, you know, you failed 1 million times. Nobody says that. That's, you know, you're not glorified. So, I think that kind of, if you try to sell it, that I think.
That's it. So that'll leave you to all the next questions and answers you might need anyway. Okay, makes sense. Well, thank you everybody for coming here. Thank you, Bernard, for coming here today to share your advice and knowledge with us. And let's network a little bit more. Thank you.
You're welcome.